I would say the first place entries are demonstrating some innovation in an industry which is slow to innovate historically. I think technology is playing a much larger role in the industry, certainly as far as environmental concerns, impacts, LEED certification, certainly in the development category. Every leading entry has at least a LEED Gold, and clearly those innovations are being tailored toward the tenants and what their needs are. I think that's paramount in the minds of the builders. Still, most of the activity in the development sector is build to suit. As corporations respond to changes in the tax code, ownership of real estate is becoming more attractive, especially in a very low-cost capital environment.
Well, in terms of the submissions reflecting the 2012 real estate market, I think one important thing is the geographic spread of the things that we were looking at. A few years ago, if you were looking at transactions that weren't bankruptcies or some kind of a disaster, you were looking at New York, you were looking at San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and that's where the transactions were happening. This year we were looking at things in Seattle, in Oklahoma City, in the Los Angeles area, but not West Los Angeles, which had been very active and the like, and in the Southeast, reflecting, I think, the fact that the economy is recovering nationwide and that the real estate markets are starting to regain their activity on a nationwide basis with complex and interesting deals that aren't all rescue missions, which is what we saw in 2009.
Yeah, when I looked at the submissions today, one thing I thought was interesting is that there were submissions that were not within the United States, specifically one from Australia and a couple from Canada. And I think right now, as everyone's aware, it's a very, very global market. And the relationship between Canada, the United States, and Australia, is very, very important. And it was interesting to see that some of the really strong submissions actually related to Australia and to Canada. I think the biggest surprise to me is what's changed in 2012, which was the availability for people to get debt. Because when we looked at the debt submissions, there were a number of them. It seemed like it was very, very easy to obtain debt, whereas a number of years ago it would be the opposite. It would have been very, very complicated to put some debt structures together.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of sustainability consciousness, and this is the first time we've had an international submission from Perth this year. And they pulled out all the stops. They don't use LEED, they use a different point system, but they pulled out all the stops, and it was really, really impressive. We also have seen some repositioning of office and inclusion of historical sites in a way that involves public space. So I think there's a growing recognition that public space can create and enhance real estate property values.
I think in terms of the unexpected, I'm always surprised in an environment like this to see deals getting done places where I would consider to be off the beaten path. There were submissions in some secondary and tertiary markets. There were some non-U.S. Submissions that we had to consider, and so that's always interesting to me because I think in my position analyzing the market overall, you tend to get a very a big picture perspective, and it these days tends to lead you to believe that most of the activity is concentrated in a relatively small number of large markets. But I think looking at the overall submissions, I think that wasn't exactly true. Certainly a lot of them did come from those kinds of markets, but there were a number of them that came from markets that I thought were a little bit off the radar screen. And that's always interesting to get away from the New Yorks and the Washingtons and San Franciscos of the world.